One of the things that I think that was quite interesting, though, was there was a pathologist who examined Jodi's body, and it was an Italian guy, Professor Anthony Basutil. He said the injuries to Jodi were caused by a stout, sharp pointed blade, and Luke's knife was a 4-inch scunting blade. But like I say, this blade in particular was apparently brought after Jodi's murder. But again, I can't remember if I said this previously, but he liked outdoor activities. He liked camping. He liked horse riding. He liked caravanning and doing the tracking with his dog Mia. So it's not necessarily unusual to have a knife at that age. And I think I might have mentioned, like, my husband, he's a fisherman. Yeah. He had a knife when he was about 16. The fact that she gave the knife in as well, I don't know. There was nothing found on the knife. They thought it was a replacement one. Mm-hmm. Was the real knife being hidden? It was never found.
It was a big thing at the time. Would they not have appealed to people? Okay, there's this woman come in and bought this knife recently. Can you come? Done something.
Yeah.
They could have. Sorry, interrupting.
No. And also, I forgot to mention as well, it had on the pouch this was another thing as well. The numbers 666 were also etched into the material.
Yeah.
So that's, that was always a thing that got me. But then I weigh it up against a lot of the other stuff. And, this is why this case, I think, feels so unique. And this is why there had to be a 6 or 7-part series on it in the end. And this is why people are still talking about it 20 years on, because of the complexities of all of this. There's so much contradiction in one case that it's really, really hard to get your head around, isn't it?
It is. And this is the thing, there's a lot of people that are saying he's guilty, and there's a lot of people saying he's not. But what we all really agree on is that there's a lot of discrepancy. There's a lot of things that are unanswered, a lot of questions unanswered. And I just don't know why the police are so scared is it money? Is it resources? But why are they so scared to do a review of it? Are they scared to what they're going to find? It's gone on for so long now. He's not going to get anywhere because he's not admitting to it, which if he didn't do it, he's absolutely right. Even to get out, you've spent so long in there for something that you didn't do. If you didn't, no, I'm not admitting I did it. I get where he's coming from.
Yeah.
And they're not giving an inch either. And I just think, come on, give a wee something, review it. You've got police detectives, previous police detectives that are saying there's something not right. What are you frightened of?
I think there's a lot of public interest.
Yeah.
And ultimately we have a justice system to protect the public. So, and obviously, Luke's stay in HMP, is funded by the taxpayer. I do think there is public interest, and that should possibly be taken more into account. Then I understand that a review of it will cost a lot of money. And if they are that set on the fact that they've got the right person, then okay. But I would really like to hear more from them on why 20 years later they still think 100% that they've got the right person despite any forensic evidence.
Well, yes, exactly. I know we're going to come to it, but they've started destroying the evidence as well. So come on, if you're starting to do that, you need to step up a wee bit. Luke says he wasn't allowed to take to the stand. Did you speak to him about that? Did he want to take to the stand? Did he want to have his say? Did he feel confident of the outcome of that?
We didn't speak about that directly, but Donald Findlay was quite adamant. His QC was like, it's not a good idea for you to do that. And I think it's really subjective. It's what surprises me, and I think what surprised a lot of people on the podcast was how articulate Luke was and how gentle and mild-mannered he seemed to be, considering his situation. Obviously, now he's a man in his 30s, so it's very different from being a teenager. I don't know what he was like then. And I've obviously seen the interview of him on Sky, and I think that was an absolute catastrophe. And because that had been put out before the trial, I think they just saw how awfully that went and just thought, no, we're going to keep him off the stand.
Yeah. I know that a lot of people see if the person, the accused, doesn't take to the stand, they see that as for some reason guilty. But was he 15 at that time, wasn't he?
He was 15, yeah.
God, that's daunting. I think I can see Donald Findlay's side. Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
I just wondered that you said in your episodes that you'd love to hear from a jury member, that they can't, You can't contact them and they can't see what happened in there. But did anybody ever reach out to you? I'm curious. After your episode.
No. Oh, I wish.
Even off the record.
Off the records, yeah, I'd have taken that. Yeah, absolutely. No.
That's disappointing.
No, I did. Yeah, I do wonder especially because it was a majority verdict and we don't know what that majority was.
Yeah.
So that at least one person, by telling us it's a majority, at least one person said they didn't think he was guilty. But I would have loved to have known if that was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many people thought that. I'd love to know.
It would give you, I suppose it would give you a wee bit of hope, really, wouldn't it, if it wasn't such a big gap?
Yeah, just some insight, I think, into what that deliberation room would have been like as well.
My sister she was actually a juror in a murder trial recently.
Wow.
And she hated it. She's really into true crime, and she watches all the true crime programs.
Yeah.
But she says it was awful, and the decision had some abuse afterwards, because what's reported in the newspapers is not what actually happens. And I don't think
it's a snapshot, isn't it? Sometimes, and there's no context,
and they don't tell the truth a lot of the time either. So what they were reporting wasn't really what was happening in court. They weren't given the full picture. So then, obviously, when there was one of them was found innocent, my sister, she knew, I think, in herself that he probably was guilty, but they hadn't given the evidence. There was nothing to prove it. There was a shadow of a doubt. And the jury were called all names, and how would they feel if they were stabbed and burnt? And oh God.
Oh my goodness.
It was awful. So
that sounds
wouldn't wish that on anybody.
No, and you know what, the trauma that jurors go through as well is absolutely just, actually, it's really funny you've brought that up. That there's a future episode of the Real podcast I'm doing, and it's actually about jury members. Obviously, it's a true crime podcast. The jurors somehow end up implicated in a crime or the crime. So it's quite a crazy episode, actually. But also going through some of the really traumatic stuff that they have to see and they have to hear, especially as Jodi's photos were shown in court as well. The photos of her body.
Yeah, it's a shame, wasn't it? Why would they do that? I don't understand.
Impact. I think it's a technique that
Jodi's family were there, though.
Yeah,
like that.
It feels like, almost like, for me, if that was my loved one, it would feel like they were being violated all over again.
Yeah, me too. Poor souls.
Awful.
What was Luke's motive? What could have been his motive?
This is it, isn't it? I mean, I never had the answer to that, because there was never any. I mean, the prosecution had said, tried to make that there was like a love triangle thing going on. There was not, these were kids that were going out with each other for a couple of months. Yep. It wasn't that deep, I don't think. I know that obviously it's puppy love, teenage love, all this kind of stuff. But, this wasn't a jilted husband who had, been left for his best friend or anything like that. And, there was no behaviour that anyone reported that suggested that either of them were overly jealous, that there'd been any kind of violence within their relationship, or at all. So it seemed just so unlikely that would be how it ends in that murder that, even to a serial killer, that's a pretty brutal murder. So it just that always, for me, that was the only real motive that they ever came up with. But that wasn't based on anything. It was a speculation. So I've always struggled with it.
Somebody, I can't remember who it was, but they said that basically the violence, the degree of the violence that was put upon Jodi, somebody said, I'm sure they said that it's psychopath, really aggressive. So since he's been in prison, has he been assessed? Has he had a counsellor, a psychologist, and has he been assessed to have that kind of disorder, a psychopath?
No. And he's not started any violence in prison since he's been there. And I just think, in a place like a prison where actually having a fight is sometimes seen as entertainment. So, I've interviewed so many people who've been in prison and, been in there for a duration and known people as well. And, fights, you don't really overthink them in prison. It's sort of part of the lifestyle, if you like, which is awful to say, and obviously not for everybody, but it is. So if you were that way inclined and violence was something, if you take someone like Charles Bronson, You know, he's been violent many a times in prison and had fights and all of this. And that's because he is a violent man, and that's what he's done. So yeah, for that to have never played out again, it just seems strange, doesn't it, that that's your one crime that you do in your whole life.
Yeah.
And it's that.
And you don't, I mean, I don't not profess to be an expert, but they say that you don't just start off murdering, it's an escalation.
That's
and there was
right.
no signs of that either.
No.
And that was brutal. I mean, that's somebody out of their mind. Somebody said that, wasn't it? He was somebody out of their mind.
Yeah.
But then he went on to give a 22-page statement to the police, didn't he? Was that night? How was he so calm? I mean, I know that he spoke to somebody and they said that he's likely in shock because they're so calm. 22 pages. Do you think he would have, it would have maybe hit him eventually? That's a lot.
Do you know what? Randomly, 22 pages feels like a lot. You know what? I've recently read statements that are hundreds of pages.
Oh, God, really?
And they are, I mean, oh my goodness. You know, I've told you, Dawn, obviously the case I'm doing at the moment, which is going to be a 10-parter. That one, the amount of statements that I have access to absolutely everything in this police file. I shouldn't have it, but I do. And I'm working under this sort of journalistic privilege. I know what I can say and legally can't say. But reading some of those statements, I've opened the file and I'm like, oh my God, there's 170 pages in here. And it's like, wow. So I did used to think 22 pages was a really long statement, but actually I sort of now see that as, okay, that's probably a fair, yeah. As I think we sort of said, he was sort of singled out from day one as the suspect. So do you know what? Maybe I would have thought that 22 pages is adequate. When you read these kind of statements from the police, some of them are like, and I was wearing, blue socks and pink underwear and black trousers. And, it reminds me sometimes of when you've got like a word count on an essay at school and you're at 450 words and you've got to make it 500 words. So you just start adding in these random words. And that's what some of these police statements feel like. I mean, they have to be extremely thorough, and I know that's why they're doing it. But that's sometimes, that's sometimes how it reads.
That's a good insight. I wondered how you got that, because that's real and raw, not what you read in the papers, which is what a lot of my stuff is. And I know it can't really be always trusted. So
no, I mean, I had all that access with Stuart Lubbock as well, the guy who was found in Michael Barrymore's swimming pool. He was the first series that I did. And because Stuart's family had sued the police, part of that process means that they have to hand over everything. Every single statement, every single toxicology report, coroner's report, crime scene photos, absolutely everything. Wow. So again, I was just given this folder, and it was so thick. I mean, I had to have help carrying it to the car. Like, that's how thick it was.
My God.
And you have to sit there and go through it all. And obviously you sit there and you look at it and you think, I need to Google half of these words because, especially in toxicology reports, if you're not medically trained, then you have to go back and have a look through. So it was really quite something. So it is great insight, and it does give you a real unique perspective, but also at the same time, it's so much work because you sort of feel like you can't just read one or you can't just read half. You have to read the whole lot. Otherwise, you're not, having a balanced view. And so then you have to sort of make this commitment to yourself, and you're like, I'm going to read every single thing in here. And lawyers get paid, £200 an hour to do that. So, yeah.
You're doing it because it's what you enjoy. Well, I don't mean enjoy, but you know what I mean.
Feel passionate about,
That's the better way.
That'll do.
And you've got to take it in as well. It's not just a case of reading it like you read a book, but you don't take it in. You've got to understand it and take it in, because you've got to then, interpret it.
Yeah,
so it's not easy.
That's it. And choose and sort of know legally what you can put out there as well. That's very difficult because, if it's not out in the public domain, you might be able to mention some things, but you can't mention anything that will jeopardize the case. You can't, mention people that haven't been mentioned before. You don't know if they're dead or alive. It's, all of that factors into it. It's a real minefield. Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes sense why somebody like me, when they asked, could I have, some paperwork? And we're like, yeah, no, you're not a journalist. Oh, that makes sense now.
You know what though? It's like, I don't think that matters. I think it's like but you're really intelligent. You do really good research on your podcast. I've listened to your episodes and they're in such detail.
I want
Sometimes
to know more though. I want to know the truth.
you can collab with me on the next one if you want. I'll be really happy to have some help actually, to go through them all.
Oh my God, I would love that. I just immerse myself. I love immersion. You're probably sound like you're the same. You need to immerse yourself in everything. I read everything I can. If I can get a book, I'm happy because it's a little bit more truth to that sometimes.
It's a real insight, I think, into the processes as well, because you see who they've interviewed, and you can go as far as taking it and looking at like what times they interviewed someone or where they interviewed someone. All that information is there, and it does really bring it to life. It brings the whole process. It feels very, very real.
That's the difference, isn't it? Watching it on the TV is one thing, you can kind of detach yourself, but what you're doing is actually it's raw, real. It's happened. Yeah.
Happened, yeah.
God. Sandra Lean, she started a petition back in 2021 to have a full independent review of Luke's case. Now, was that, I know she took that to obviously the Lord Advocate Dorothy Bain and it was knocked back, but is that still ongoing? Can we still sign that petition? Do you know?
It's still up, and you can still sign.
Okay.
But whether it will go any further, who knows? I think there's a lot of answers. There's a lot of questions that need answering, and a review by someone completely independent might offer that, because so many people have chipped in, especially online. People that work either as detectives or they're former FBI agents, even, or they're criminologists. They've sort of had a look at the overview of the case, and even in the Murder in a Small Town documentary, people were saying, okay, this definitely needs looking at. There's something not quite right here. This feels like a very unsafe conviction. Yeah. And I think that came across in the podcast as well. I interviewed so many different people, and I never ever said to them, I want you to tell me that he's innocent on this, or I want you to allude to that. I never did. I said, be really honest, and I was kind of hoping that someone would come on and say, actually, I think he's absolutely guilty and this is the reason why. But I never got that. I did ask a journalist who has reported on Luke a lot, and she was very kind, and she said, I'm sorry, but I can't, because she said that she'd been attacked by some of Luke's supporters online for speaking out. And her thing was, I trust the justice system. The appeal keeps getting knocked back. There's no reason for me not to believe them. So I'm going to report on this as if he is a convicted murderer, which is what he is. So I did understand that to an extent. I definitely do. But it was a shame I couldn't get somebody on the podcast. I would have loved to have had someone who was really passionate about it in the other direction, just to get their insight and just to take their points on board. But yeah, I didn't get it.
I know what you're saying there about, you understand her point of view because she believes in the justice system, and that's fair enough. But as a journalist, would our interest not be piqued that there are some answered questions? I just wonder, what if she found something? Has she really gone into it, or is she just taking it all at face value as well?
I really don't know, I wish I'd had a chance to have more of a conversation. I just said, thanks for your reply. I'm sorry that's happened to you. Journalists really, I think for me, is to react to things that are going on, things that are current. For me, the reason I picked up the podcast, and I said this at the beginning, the reason it wasn't for Luke, and actually it wasn't at the beginning, it did in the end when I've read the story properly and I got into it, it was for Jodi in the end. But it was actually because there were so many people that were convinced by this that it was almost like, wow, well, what are we all missing? Because 25,000 people who signed that petition, that is a huge number of people. What have they all signed, and why have they all signed it? I would have loved to have known that. And I did speak to people who signed the petition, and I did get their insight into it. But for me, that was why I took on Luke's case in particular and Jodi's murder, because there were so many people that were talking about it. This was a live situation, if you like. And I think, in my head, that's journalists report on live situations. But they don't have to necessarily agree, so I can't see it both ways.
Oh, no, not at all. No, she's entitled to her opinion, but she shouldn't be attacked for that. Like you say, nobody knows, and you're entitled to your opinion.
I'd really love to see something, one way or the other, to kind of sum this up, but I just don't know if we'll ever get it, and it's a bitter pill to swallow sometimes.
Yeah. Yes, if they're so sure and there's something that led them there and we're not seeing it, just tell us. Just put it to bed. This is it. This is what we found. It's conclusive. Done. But there's not. They're not doing that. They're hiding.
Something's happening, isn't it? Something's happening, definitely.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it is. Wish I did.
I know. I was going to say, regarding the Lord Advocate, though, they're not in there for very long, are they? They kind of transition quite a lot of time. So she's in there just now, but there might be a chance when she's out that they can maybe take it back again.
Potentially. Maybe.
What stage is it at the moment? Do you know? Is there another appeal in the process, or is it just we're stuck just now?
There's none at the moment. I think the main focus now is to do some further testing, which was sort of under the radar, I think, a little bit. And then, but all legit, it's all going through the systems, and to find out why this evidence was destroyed, or it was in the process of being destroyed.
Also, it wasn't actually destroyed; it was the fingernails, wasn't it?
That was one of the items. Yeah, it was Jodi's fingernails. Yeah.
Do you know what the other items were?
Yeah, I've got a little list actually.
Do we know who yet told the?
So there was a whistleblower.
Yeah, that's the one.
Who knew it was happening. Yeah, the people close to everything know who, but they won't. Right. They won't reveal who. So the fingernail DNA was taken away by police to be destroyed. So that was the main item. There were 2 knives as well. There were swabs that had swabbed other blades as well. Burnt clothes, a green Parka style jacket. So we've talked about that.
God.
That was actually, I don't think that was the Parka jacket that belonged to Luke. I've got a feeling that was his friends, one of his school friends, and that was there and tested. There was more than 100 items though that were taken.
You're joking.
No.
To be destroyed, but they hadn't been destroyed yet.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Another thing that was taken as well was, which I found really bizarre, there were 2 essays that were that the title of the essays were No Remorse. And it was, these essays described killing a girl in the woods. And these were done by a local drug addict who lived very close to where she was found dead.
Has he been mentioned? Have we mentioned him yet or not?
We've gone through the suspects, haven't we? Have we gone through the suspects?
Yes. Who? Yes, because is he dead now?
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about him. He did that. That's his.
The 2 essays.
Bloody hell.
Yes.
Okay. Have you seen them? Have you?
I haven't seen them. I have not seen them. No.
Oh my God.
I haven't. There was also some reports. I can't remember if they were Jodi's medical records or psychology reports or something, but there was something there as well. And I think for me, if you looked at in any of the papers around December last year, the headlines always mentioned her fingernails. It's like one of the most important pieces of evidence. The murdered person's fingernails can hold so many clues in there, or so much evidence in there. So for them to be taken away, it's not like it was a bottle that was found half a mile from the crime scene. They thought, we don't really need that anymore. This was her fingernails, or scrapings of her fingernails, but it's just mad.
Did they say why? Was there any paperwork that said why they were doing this?
No, I mean, we've not had the why, but
we had who signed it off.
Have a guess.
No, Dorothy Bain.
Yes.
Jesus.
The Lord Advocate that was married to the prosecutor. So it has emerged now that Luke's legal team could potentially sue the prosecutors after it emerged that they sanctioned the police to destroy evidence from this murder, from Jodi Jones's murder. A letter from the Lord Advocate's government solicitors admitted that the evidence had been taken away, and then confirms that they have now stopped destroying the rest of the evidence and that it's been halted But now they're in the process of finding out what evidence is salvageable and what's not.
My God. My jaw is still on the floor. I cannot believe she did that.
Sweeping away.
Oh, she can't get away with that.
Oh,
that's a cracker.
Well, bomb.
Uh-huh.
It feels quite personal, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
This is me now completely removing myself as the podcast host and as the producer of Through the Wall and all of that. It is now just sort of looking in and thinking, this really does feel quite personal.
It just makes them look bad. They keep doing it. We're ignoring, there could be a mistake. We're not doing a review, and now we're going to destroy the evidence. They're really, really not making themselves look very good.
No.
Shocked.
I know.
I'm glad that there's something in place. I'm glad it came out. If that person hadn't come forward, shit, we got away with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that would have been a real, if they had ever got to appeal, that would have been a real shocker to know that all the evidence had been taken away. Yeah.
I'm curious what they say, why they did that. What's their reasoning?
This is the sad thing, they never really have to be held accountable. They don't have to give a reason for not doing an appeal of a conviction. They don't believe that they have to, unless they are sued. I don't think they have to give a reason.
I think he's got any choice. They've got to start suing them, haven't they? Just stop it, otherwise they're just going to.
I know I would if I was in that team, but yeah.
God almighty. When you said, when it comes to forensics, there was so much you could say in your podcast, but you told everything of really significance and all that. Was there anything else? I mean, obviously, I know you mentioned it. Was there anything else that stood out for you that you can think of at all?
No. Not really. It was the one big thing that I would have liked to have gone into a little bit more potentially was the motive aspect, which we just kind of touched upon because there wasn't any. And that I felt there should have been a lot more focus on that, for any crime that's committed, whether it's a war crime, whether it's a serial killer or, there's always usually some sort of motive. And because there wasn't one, it was just something I wish I knew more about. I wish I knew more about the lack of motive, but there just wasn't anything there for me to look into.
Yeah, and it bothers me because there was so many, others potential. Oh no, I've got something else I want to mention. The Parka jacket. See, you blew my mind with the Dorothy Bay, and I forgot I had this because you mentioned one of the items was a green Parka jacket that was going to be up for being destroyed. But you said it wasn't Luke's, it was his friend's.
That's right.
So, do you think maybe he could have borrowed his friends at some point, and that's what the boys who've seen him, he was maybe wearing his friends?
Yeah, maybe. I didn't actually know about this other Parka jacket in evidence until it was reported as one of the missing items. It was not something that I'd come across before.
Yeah. See, that's been bothering me, this bloody Parka jacket. And then it's like, there you go. You swap clothes, you swap jackets, you swap clothes when you're younger. You could have seen him wearing that and thought it was his, and it wasn't. So let's put that, that's me, I'm happy. See, I just like an answer.
Oh God, wouldn't we all love an answer to this, honestly?
I like it,
It's like every case you must get it as well, every case that you research, even if it's a solved case as of this, I mean, this conviction, we're talking about it because it feels unsafe. But even the cases that are solved that we cover, in our podcasts, there's always just questions. I'm like, if we just had the answers to this, it would sit much better with us. It's answers are what we need.
Exactly.
Definitely. And I feel like in this case, that's what we'd get from an independent review.
That's all it is. I mean, we could come out with the same outcome. It could be, all these questions are answered, and that's fine. That's okay. But just do the independent review. There's something not right. That's all. Just come on.